Soft light slipped through the curtains, painting the small living room in shades of gold. The air smelled of warm toast and coffee. Somewhere, a clock ticked gently, filling the silence between heartbeats. It was a peaceful morning, the kind that made life feel calm, ordinary, and safe. Armand sat at the wooden dining table, typing on his laptop. The words on the screen were part of his new book, his first real novel. He called it The Lines Between Love and Sin, a story about truth, betrayal, and how people hide behind smiles. His wife, Mina, moved quietly in the kitchen. She was humming a soft tune, her hands busy with breakfast. Her belly had started to show, a small, beautiful roundness that made Armand's heart swell with pride. They had waited so long for this child. Every now and then she glanced at him. "You're writing again?" she asked, smiling. Armand nodded, closing his laptop. "Trying to. But lately, my story feels too real." She laughed lightly, not understanding what he meant. "Maybe because you write from the heart," she said. He smiled, but something in his chest tightened. Because lately his heart was not as simple as it used to be. A soft knock came from the door. Mina wiped her hands and went to open it. Standing there, wrapped in a shawl and carrying a small basket of fruit, was her mother, Razia Begum. "Assalamu alaikum." "Beta," Razia said warmly. "Walaikum assalam, Ami," Mina replied. Hugging her, Armand rose from his chair politely. "Good morning, Ami," he greeted. Razia's smile was gentle, but her eyes lingered on him a moment too long. "Good morning, Armand Beta. You're up early, I see." He nodded, rubbing the back of his neck, trying to make progress with the book. "Oh yes, the writer of the house," she said softly, with a hint of teasing in her tone. "Maybe one day you'll write about us?" Armand forced a small laugh. If only you knew, he thought. Razia joined them for breakfast. The three sat together, laughter and small talk filling the air. Yet beneath the warmth of their voices, something unspoken hummed quietly, like a secret only the walls understood. Armand noticed it again, that strange closeness between him and Razia. It was never intentional. It just grew. The late-night talks when Mina was asleep. The way she'd listen to his problems, how she understood things Mina never noticed. It began as comfort, a shared sadness, a quiet support between two people lost in their own worlds. But then the looks had lingered longer, the silences had felt heavier, and now as she poured him tea, her fingers brushed against his for a second, too long, too soft. His breath caught. Mina was talking about the baby names, unaware of the tiny storm that passed between them. He pulled his hand back and focused on his plate, pretending nothing happened. Razia smiled faintly, her voice calm.
"Armand Beta, how is your story coming?"
He met her eyes, searching for meaning. "It's complicated," he replied. "Ah," she said quietly. "The best stories always are." Their eyes met again, a heartbeat too long. Then Mina laughed about something on her phone and the spell broke. After breakfast, Mina went to rest. The pregnancy made her tired easily. Armand stayed behind to clear the table and Razia helped him. The morning light had shifted. Shadows now danced softly on the walls. "You should rest too," he said gently. She shook her head. "I can't sit idle. It reminds me how quiet the world becomes when no one is talking to you." He looked at her. There was sadness in her tone, the kind that comes from years of loneliness. Her husband had passed away when Mina was a teenager. Since then, Razia had lived between duty and emptiness. "You're not alone," Armand said softly. She smiled. Sometimes that's just something people say to make others feel better. He wanted to say more, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, they stood in silence. The sound of dishes clinking in the sink filled the air. Somewhere a bird chirped outside, breaking the stillness. Then Razia spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "You're a good man, Armand. Mina is lucky." He turned to face her. "I'm the lucky one." Their eyes met again, longer this time, deeper. Something unspoken passed between them. Not desire, not love. Something heavier. A shared ache, maybe. The clock ticked. Mina's voice called from the other room, breaking the moment. Razia stepped back, her expression quickly softening into the calm face of a mother again. "Go," she said. "She needs you." Armand nodded, walking away slowly, but his chest was tight, his thoughts louder than ever. As he entered the bedroom, Mina smiled sleepily. "What were you two talking about? Just Stories, he replied. She smiled again, closing her eyes. You and your stories, she murmured. Armand looked at her, then out toward the living room where Razia's soft humming filled the air. His heart felt split between comfort and confusion. He sat down beside his wife, touched her hand gently, and whispered, Every story starts somewhere. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves, whispering secrets through the morning light. The days passed quietly after that morning. The house carried a strange calm, like everything was normal on the surface, but something was shifting underneath. Armand spent more time writing. His story was changing almost on its own. What began as fiction now felt like confession. Each word carried a piece of him, and each page felt heavier than the last. His wife, Mina, was glowing with pregnancy. She had that soft, peaceful smile that made her look like light itself. She talked about baby clothes, names, dreams. Armand listened, but part of him was lost somewhere else, somewhere between guilt and longing. Razia visited often now. She said it was to help Mina, but Armand could feel her presence even when she wasn't around. The faint scent of her perfume on the cushions, the echo of her laughter in the kitchen, it followed him like a ghost. One evening, rain started to fall. The sky outside turned dark and thunder rolled over the city. Mina had gone to her mother's house for a checkup, and Armand stayed home to finish a chapter of his book. The clock ticked. The rain tapped gently on the window. Then came a soft knock at the door. He opened it, and there she was, Razia, drenched from the rain, holding her shawl tight around her shoulders. Electricity went out at my place, she said with a small, embarrassed smile. Mina said you'd be home. I hope I'm not disturbing you. He shook his head quickly. No, not at all. Come in, Ami. She stepped inside, her wet sandals leaving faint marks on the floor. The smell of rain filled the room, fresh and cold. Armand handed her a towel and poured her a cup of tea. Thank you, she said softly, her voice warm despite the storm outside. You always make the best tea, he smiled awkwardly. Old habit. They sat near the window, the sound of rain filling the silence between them. Lightning flashed, followed by distant thunder. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the ticking clock and the faint hum of the storm. Then Razia broke the silence. You look tired, Armand. Are you sleeping well? He looked at her, surprised by her gentle tone. Not really, he admitted. My mind doesn't stop. Sometimes I feel like I'm living inside my story. She tilted her head. And what is your story about? He hesitated, staring at his cup. It's about love, he said finally. Love that crosses lines. Love that shouldn't exist but does. Razia's breath caught almost too quietly to hear. Her fingers tightened around her cup. And what happens in the story? She asked. He looked up, meeting her eyes. I don't know yet, maybe. Both people pay the price. A silence fell again. Heavy. Full of meaning neither dared to name. Razia looked away, watching the rain through the window. You're a good man, Armand, she whispered. But sometimes good people fall too. Her words hit him like a truth he'd been avoiding. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words were gone. All that remained was the sound of their hearts and the soft drumming of rain. Then suddenly the lights flickered and went out. Darkness filled the room. Only the faint glow from the window remained. It's okay, Armand said, his voice low. I'll light a candle. He moved toward the table, but she stopped him with a gentle touch on his arm. Just that, soft, uncertain, trembling. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. Don't, she said quietly. It's just rain. It'll pass. They stood there, close enough to feel each other's breath. Neither moved. The storm outside grew stronger, but inside time stood still. For a second it felt like the world had disappeared. No rules, no right or wrong. Just two souls caught in the same silence. Then her phone buzzed. It was Mina. The moment broke. Razia stepped back quickly, her eyes full of things she couldn't say. She's fine, she whispered after reading the message. She's staying at my sister's tonight. Armand nodded. Good, he said softly. That's good. She looked at him again, her voice trembling. You should stop writing tonight, Armand. Some stories shouldn't be finished. He smiled weakly. But sometimes they finish themselves. She didn't reply. She just turned toward the door, her face pale, her shawl clutched tightly. Good night, Beta, she said. Good night, Ami. The door closed softly behind her. The rain kept falling. Armin stood there for a long time, staring at the empty doorway. The house felt bigger, colder. His laptop sat open on the table. The cursor blinked on a blank page. He sat down slowly and began to type. Some sins don't start with a kiss. They start with silence, with the moments we pretend not to feel. He stopped, staring at the words. His reflection stared back at him from the dark screen. A man caught between truth and guilt. Between two lives he never meant to connect. He whispered to himself, "And I am the author." Outside, thunder rolled again. Inside, the story was only beginning. The next morning came quiet but heavy. The rain had stopped, yet the world still felt washed clean, fragile. Armin sat at the same dining table where everything always began. His laptop open, his coffee untouched. He hadn't slept. The words he wrote last night still burned in his mind. Some sins don't start with a kiss. They start with silence. Now, every tick of the clock sounded like an echo of that sentence. Mina returned from her mother's house around noon, her smile soft and full of light. "I missed you," she said, wrapping her arms around him. He hugged her back, but it felt different now, like guilt was sitting between them, invisible but loud. "How was your night?" she asked. "Quiet," he said quickly. She laughed. "You probably forgot to eat again." "I managed." She didn't notice the way his eyes avoided hers, the way his voice carried hesitation. She was too happy, too full of plans and dreams. She placed his hand on her belly. "She kicked last night," she said. He smiled, forcing himself to be present. "She's strong, just like her mother." But deep inside, his thoughts were elsewhere, haunted by Razia's words, her touch, her silence. That evening, Razia came again, carrying soup and a smile. Mina's face lit up when she saw her. "Ami, I was just thinking of calling you." Razia kissed her daughter's forehead. A mother always knows. Armin stood up from the couch, unsure how to act. His heart raced just from seeing her again. She looked calm, collected, as if last night never happened. But when her eyes met his for a brief second, something unspoken passed between them. Something too real to ignore. "Armin Beta," Razia said softly. "Did you sleep well?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Ami, I'm fine." Her lips curved faintly. "Good." The sound of her voice made his chest tighten. Mina noticed his distraction. "You two are always so formal," she teased, laughing. "You can relax around her, you know." Razia chuckled softly. But her gaze didn't leave Armin. "Yes," she said quietly. "Maybe we all need to relax." The words were innocent enough, yet they carried weight only Armin could feel. Later that night, Mina went to bed early. Her pregnancy made her easily tired. Armin stayed in the living room, pretending to write. Razia helped clean the kitchen before preparing to leave. "Let me walk you to the gate," Armin said. She nodded, tightening her shawl. The night air was cool, the sky clear after days of rain. The streetlights glowed softly, painting shadows on the ground. For a long moment they stood by the gate, saying nothing. Then Razia broke the silence. "You didn't sleep last night, did you?" He sighed. "How did you know?" "Because I didn't either." He turned to her. "Ami." "Don't call me that," she said quickly, her voice trembling. He froze. The word hung between them, heavier than ever. She looked down, her eyes glistening. "I didn't mean that. It's just, every time you call me that, it reminds me of what shouldn't be." "Nothing happened," he said, trying to sound sure. She looked at him sadly. "Armin, something doesn't have to happen to be wrong." He wanted to say she was wrong, that they could forget it, but he couldn't lie. Not to her. Not anymore. Then suddenly Mina's voice called from the house. "Armin, are you outside?" Razia stepped back quickly. "Go," she whispered. He nodded and went inside, leaving her standing in the moonlight, her face hidden by shadows. Inside, Mina was sitting on the couch, looking pale. "I think I need to see the doctor tomorrow," she said softly. I felt dizzy again. Concern replaced guilt for a moment. "You should rest," Armin said gently, helping her to bed. As she lay down, she smiled weakly. "You worry too much." He kissed her forehead. "That's my job." But even as he sat beside her, watching her drift to sleep, his thoughts were far away. He could still feel Razia's presence in the air, her scent lingering faintly. The next day, they went to the doctor. Everything was fine, the baby healthy, Mina glowing. But when they returned home, something unexpected waited. Razia was already there, and she looked pale. Mina rushed to her side. Ami, what's wrong? Razia forced a smile. Nothing serious, Beta. Just fatigue. I wasn't feeling well, so I came here. But when Armin looked at her, he saw fear in her eyes. And something else. Something she was hiding. Later that night, after Mina had fallen asleep, Razia came to the kitchen to drink water. Armin followed quietly. Tell me what's wrong, he said. She looked down at her hands. I went to the doctor today too. He frowned. Why? Her lips trembled before she spoke. I'm pregnant, Armin. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. For a long time, there was no sound, only the echo of his heartbeat, the faint ticking of the kitchen clock, and the soft hum of the refrigerator. You can't be, he whispered. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't plan this. I don't know how it happened. He stepped back, shaking his head. Razia, please don't say this. But the truth was already out, hanging heavy in the air like smoke. She pressed a hand over her stomach, crying softly. I didn't want to tell you, but I couldn't carry this alone anymore. Armin's breath came shallow. His world tilted. His mind screamed that it couldn't be real, and then Mina's voice came from behind them, soft, sleepy, trembling. What did you just say, Ami? They both froze. Mina stood there in the doorway, her eyes wide, her hands shaking. Razia turned pale as snow. Armin couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. The night went silent again. Only the sound of Mina's breaking heart filled the room. The silence after Mina's words was louder than thunder. The glass lay shattered on the kitchen floor, pieces glittering under the dim light. The air felt heavy, like even the house knew something terrible had just been spoken. Mina's voice trembled. What did you say? Razia stood frozen, her hands shaking. Armin tried to speak, but his throat closed. Mina, he whispered, please, just sit down, answer me. Mina's voice rose, breaking through the quiet. You're pregnant? How? And why are you both standing here like you share a secret? Razia's lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes filled with tears, shame pouring out like water from a broken vase. Mina, she began softly, it's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Mina shouted, tears now spilling down her cheeks. Tell me I didn't just hear what I think I did. Armin stepped forward, guilt twisting his voice. Please, Mina, you need to calm down. It's not safe for you or the baby. Her eyes turned sharp, wounded. Don't talk about my baby right now, Armin. Tell me whose baby she's carrying. The words hit him like knives. He looked at Razia, his mother-in-law, the woman who had once been only family, now tied to him in a way he couldn't explain or undo. Razia collapsed into a chair, covering her face. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered. It was one night, one terrible mistake. Mina's scream tore through the house. You both betrayed me. Her voice cracked, filled with disbelief and heartbreak. She stumbled back, holding her stomach. My husband and my mother? How could you do this to me? Armin moved toward her, desperate. Mina, I swear I never wanted this. I don't even know how to explain. Then don't, she cried. Because there's no explanation that can make this right. Her tears fell like rain, her whole body trembling. I trusted you, Armin. I trusted both of you. And now, she broke off, clutching her belly as a sharp pain hit. Mina. Armin rushed to her side, panic flooding his chest. Razia jumped up, terrified.
She's hurting.
Call the doctor. But Mina pushed them both away. Don't touch me. Don't either of you come near me. She ran to her room, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the house like the end of something beautiful. For hours, the house stayed in silence. Razia sat on the floor, crying quietly. Armin stood by the window, his hands trembling, staring at the dark sky. I ruined everything, Razia whispered. My daughter, she will never forgive me. Armin's voice was low, broken. She shouldn't forgive me either. I should have stopped it before it even began. Razia shook her head, her tears endless. I was lonely, Armin. You were kind. You listened when no one else did. I confused gratitude for something else. He closed his eyes. And I confused sympathy for love. The truth hung heavy between them. There was no excuse, only pain. Hours later, Mina's door opened. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale. She had been crying all night, Pack your things, she said coldly. Armand turned to her. Mina, please do it, she interrupted, her voice sharp but fragile. I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear you. I just want you gone. Razia stepped forward. Beta, listen to me, then don't call me that. Mina snapped. You lost that right the moment you betrayed me. Razia's knees weakened. She tried to speak, but her voice broke into sobs. Mina looked at both of them, her hands trembling. Do you know what hurts the most? It's not just the betrayal, it's that I loved you both more than anyone in this world. Her words cut deeper than any scream. Please, Mina, Armand whispered, his eyes red. Let me explain, There's nothing left to explain, she said quietly. You wrote stories about love, Armand. Maybe now you'll write about destruction. She turned away, her tears silent now. I'll raise my child without lies. The next day, Armand left the house. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't stay there anymore. Razia stayed behind. Her soul shattered, her heart full of regret. When he reached his old writing studio, he sat at the desk and opened his laptop. The blinking cursor waited like a silent judge. He began to type. She found out. She saw everything. And now love is no longer a story. It's a crime we both committed. His fingers paused. He looked at the title on the top of the page. True Infidelity Story. My mother-in-law and my wife are both pregnant. For a long time he stared at it, the irony cutting deeper than the truth itself. Then slowly, he added the final words to his sentence. And I am the author. Outside, the wind howled softly against the window. Inside, he wept like a man who had finally understood the cost of his choices. Razia's voice echoed in his mind, broken and full of sorrow. Some mistakes don't fade. They become stories. Armand looked at the screen, tears falling onto the keys. Maybe that was all he could do now. Turn his sin into a story, his guilt into words, and hope that one day, writing it would set him free. But deep inside, he knew. Some stories never end. They just change shape and live forever inside the ones they hurt. Weeks passed. Armand's small rented studio smelled of coffee, paper, and sleepless nights. The clock on the wall ticked like a slow reminder that time heals everything, except guilt. He lived in silence now. No laughter, no morning voice calling his name. Only the tapping of his keyboard and the faint hum of regret. Every sentence he wrote felt like a confession. Every word carried Mina's tears and Razia's shame. His book had grown, chapter after chapter pouring straight from his heart. He wasn't writing fiction anymore. He was documenting his own fall. Across the city, Mina sat in her mother's house, the same home where her world had broken. She hadn't spoken to either of them since that night. Her belly had grown. The baby kicked often now. But each movement only reminded her of what she had lost, the family that should have been whole. Razia stayed quiet most days. She moved slowly, weakly. The doctor had warned her about stress and blood pressure, but she rarely listened. Her pregnancy was complicated. It wasn't just her body that was fragile. It was her soul. Sometimes she would sit outside on the porch staring at the sky. I destroyed my daughter's peace, she whispered to herself. And I destroyed mine too. She thought of Armand often, but she never reached out. The shame was too heavy to carry, and every time she saw Mina's face, her heart cracked a little more. One evening, Mina found a brown envelope at the door. No name, no address, just her. Inside was a manuscript. The first page read, True Infidelity Story by Armand Qureshi. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages. The words were his. The story was theirs. She read for hours through the confessions, the pain, the endless guilt. Every detail, every emotion was written so honestly that she felt she was living those moments again. By the time she reached the final page, her face was wet with tears. The last line read, I wrote this story because truth can't hide forever, and because I couldn't live until I told it. She pressed the pages to her chest, crying quietly. It was as if he had reached out. Not for forgiveness, but for understanding. Later that night, Mina sat with her mother at the dinner table. Razia's hands trembled as she sipped her soup. Ami, Mina said softly, I read something today. Razia looked up, her heart sinking. What was it? Armand's story, Mina said. He wrote everything. Every word. Razia froze. He sent it to you? Mina nodded. Yes, and I think he wrote it to confess. The silence that followed was long and painful. Finally, Razia whispered, he shouldn't have. The world doesn't need to know our sin. Mina's voice trembled. Maybe he wasn't writing for the world. Maybe he was writing for peace. Razia looked down, her tears falling quietly into her bowl. Peace doesn't exist for people like us, Beta. Only punishment. The next morning, Mina went to visit Arman. He was surprised when he opened the door. Her face was pale but calm, her eyes tired but still kind. I read it, she said simply. He didn't pretend not to understand. Then you know everything. I already did, she replied. But reading it made me see how broken you are too. He looked away. You shouldn't pity me. I don't, she said softly. I just don't know how to hate you anymore. Arman's eyes filled. I never wanted to hurt you, Mina. You were my whole world. Then why? She asked quietly. Why ruin it? He took a deep breath. Because I was weak. Because I mistook kindness for love. And because sometimes loneliness can trick even the strongest hearts. Mina closed her eyes. And now? What will you do? I'll publish the story, he said. Not to shame anyone, but to tell people what guilt feels like. She opened her eyes, startled. You can't do that, Arman. Everyone will know. He nodded slowly. They already know. Maybe not the names, but the truth always finds its way out. Days later, the book was released online under a pseudonym. It spread quickly. People called it the most painful love story ever written. No one knew it was real. But Mina did, Razia did, and Arman did. Strangers praised it, quoting lines about forgiveness and sin. They said it sounded too raw to be fiction. They were right. But behind the screen, Arman's health began to fade. He stopped eating, stopped sleeping. The weight of the story pressed down on him until even breathing felt like a burden. Then one night his phone buzzed. A message from Mina. The world might forgive you one day, but I already have. Take care of yourself, Arman. For our child to know peace, one of us must find it first. He read it again and again until tears blurred the words. For the first time in months he smiled, a broken, tired smile. Meanwhile, Razia's condition worsened. The stress had taken its toll. One evening she collapsed in her room. Mina found her unconscious, her hand resting gently on her stomach. At the hospital, the doctor's words were soft but final. She couldn't handle the pressure, he said. The baby didn't survive. Mina stood still, her mind blank, her heart silent. She looked at her mother's still face and whispered, You were wrong, Ami. Some peace does exist. It just comes too late. That night, Arman sat by his window, unaware of what had happened. He opened his laptop and began typing the next chapter. His fingers moved slowly, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. Forgiveness is the only story that can rewrite pain, he wrote. And sometimes forgiveness doesn't come from others, it comes from the one who suffers the most. Outside, the wind carried a faint whisper through the quiet night. It sounded like her voice. Write it, Arman, it said. But this time, write to heal. The morning sun rose pale and cold, spilling through the half-open window of Arman's studio. He sat at his desk, his hands hovering over the keyboard, eyes blank. The page on his laptop glowed white, waiting, empty, expectant. He hadn't written in 3 days. For the first time, words felt useless. He kept thinking about Mina's message, her forgiveness, her grace, her pain. It gave him peace, but it also scared him, because he knew that forgiveness never came for free. Outside, the street was quiet. A child laughed somewhere in the distance, and for a brief moment Arman imagined the sound belonged to his future, the child he might never meet. Then the phone rang. He hesitated before picking it up. Hello? There was silence for a second. Then Mina's voice, weak and trembling. Arman, she's gone. His stomach dropped. Who? Ami. The word hit him like a storm. For a moment he couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The world blurred into nothing but that one sentence. Mina's voice cracked on the other end. She had a heart attack last night. The doctors. They tried, but she didn't make it. Arman's hand tightened around the phone. His throat burned. No, he whispered. No, please tell me it's not true. I thought you should know, Mina said quietly. You were part of her last prayers. The call ended, leaving only silence. Arman sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. Then his body broke. He leaned forward, his face buried in his hands, and wept, deeply, painfully, like a man who had finally run out of strength. Later that day, he went to the funeral. He stood far from the crowd, hidden beneath a tree. He didn't have the courage to stand near Mina. He didn't have the right. The air was heavy with prayers and grief. Mina's eyes looked hollow, her face pale as if life had left her too. When the body was lowered into the earth, Armin felt his knees weaken. Every handful of soil thrown on the grave felt like another layer of guilt covering his soul. He whispered, "I'm sorry. Ami, I ruined everything you loved, including you." As he turned to leave, Mina looked up. Their eyes met across the distance. She didn't speak, but in her gaze he saw both pain and peace, a strange acceptance that broke him even more. He left quietly, without saying goodbye. That night, Arman couldn't sleep. The image of Razia's face haunted him, the way she used to laugh softly when she teased him, the way she called him Beta, the way she cried that last night in the kitchen. Now all of that was gone, buried under the weight of choices that could never be undone. He opened his laptop again. The cursor blinked, waiting. He began to type. "Death doesn't erase sin. It only reminds you of the time you wasted hiding it." He stopped, staring at the words. Then he kept going. She loved her daughter, but guilt killed her before forgiveness could save her. And I, the writer who turned truth into story, will carry her silence forever. Tears blurred his vision, but he didn't stop typing. It was the only way to breathe now. Days passed. The book that had once been a secret was now spreading faster than he ever expected. Readers called it a masterpiece of pain. They said the author wrote with a voice that felt too honest, too human. They didn't know it was him. They didn't know the story was real. One night he got an email from a reader. "Your story saved me. I was living with guilt too, something I thought I could never forgive myself for. But after reading your words, I realized that love doesn't die in shame. It just hides, waiting to be forgiven." Armin read it over and over, feeling something new stir inside him. Not pride, not relief, but purpose. Maybe, he thought, that was the reason it all happened. Not to destroy him, but to make him understand how powerful truth could be when shared. Weeks turned into months. Mina gave birth to a baby girl, and soft, tiny, perfect. She named her Razia, in honor of the mother she lost and the woman she couldn't completely hate. Arman heard about it through a mutual friend. He smiled for the first time in months, though tears filled his eyes. He sent Mina a small letter. No address, no signature, just a piece of paper with a few words. Tell her she was loved and by both of us. Tell her to grow up knowing that even broken stories can end with light. One evening he visited the graveyard. The wind was gentle and the sunset painted the sky in gold and crimson. He placed a single white rose on Razia's grave and whispered, "You're free now." He stood there quietly, feeling the peace he had chased for so long. For the first time he wasn't writing, he was living his ending. As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed. A message from Mina. "I read your latest book. You wrote her beautifully. Maybe now we both can start again." Armin looked at the message, smiling softly through tears. He whispered to the wind, "Thank you, Mina." Then he walked away, the sound of his footsteps fading into the quiet evening. Back in his studio, he opened his notebook one last time. At the top of a blank page he wrote, "Epilogue, the author's confession." Then, in slow, steady letters, he wrote his final truth. Love is never pure or perfect. It's human. It's flawed. And sometimes the people who hurt us are the ones who teach us how to forgive. I was the author of this sin, but she was the author of my redemption. He closed the notebook gently. Outside, the wind carried a soft whisper, almost like her voice again calling his name through the quiet night. 2 years later, the city had changed. Buildings taller, roads wider, faces faster, but some things, guilt, memory, love, never really changed. Armin walked along the park path holding a worn leather notebook. His hair had grown silver at the edges, his face older, softer. He looked like a man who had lived too many lives in one. He no longer wrote to escape. Now he wrote to remember. His books had become popular, not for glamour or fantasy, but for truth. Readers said his words healed them. They didn't know that each story was built from his own scars. The world called him the author of forgiveness, but he still carried one story he could never truly forgive himself for, the one he had lived, not written. It was a Sunday morning when it happened. The sun was bright, the air filled with laughter. Children played in the park while parents watched from benches. Armin sat quietly near the fountain, sketching notes for a new novel. Then he heard it. A soft laugh. A sound that made his heart skip. He looked up. There she was, Mina. Her hair was shorter now, tied in a loose bun. She wore a simple white dress, her face calm and peaceful. But it wasn't her that froze him. It was the little girl holding her hand. Tiny, with big brown eyes and a smile that looked painfully familiar. She was maybe 1.5 years old. Armin's throat went dry. For a long moment, he couldn't move. He just watched, afraid even to breathe. Then Mina saw him. Their eyes met and time stopped. No words, no anger. Just silence full of everything they had once been. She walked closer, slowly. The child trotted beside her, clutching a small stuffed rabbit. When she stopped in front of him, neither spoke at first. The wind carried soft whispers of the city. Car horns, children's laughter, the world moving on. Finally, Mina broke the silence. It's been a while. Yes, he said quietly. Too long, she smiled faintly. You still write? He nodded. It's all I know how to do. Her gaze softened. I read your last book. The Price of Silence, he swallowed hard. Did you like it? It made me cry, she said honestly. But in a good way, he smiled weakly. Then maybe it did its job. The little girl tugged at Mina's hand. Mama, who is he? Mina hesitated, then knelt down. This is Armin Uncle. He's a writer. The girl smiled shyly. Mama reads your stories to me before bed. Armin's chest tightened. Does she now? The child nodded proudly. My name is Razia. Her voice, soft, bright, cut straight through him. The name hit him harder than he expected. Mina saw it in his eyes. I named her after my mother, she said gently. I thought she deserved to live again, this time without pain. Armin nodded, his throat tight. She would have loved that. The child giggled, chasing a butterfly. Her laughter floated in the air like music. Armin watched her, and for the first time in years he felt peace touch the edges of his heart. She's beautiful, he whispered. Mina smiled. She's strong too, just like her name. They sat on a nearby bench. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was quiet, calm, almost kind. I came to thank you, Mina said softly. For what? For turning pain into something meaningful. For showing me that broken things can still become beautiful. He looked at her, surprised. You were the reason I could. She turned her eyes to the sky. Sometimes I wonder if all of this happened for a reason. Maybe it had to. So we could both learn what love really is. Armin followed her gaze. Maybe love isn't about staying. Maybe it's about letting each other heal. She nodded slowly. Maybe. As the sun dipped lower, the little girl ran back to them, holding a flower. Uncle, this is for you. He smiled and accepted it gently. Thank you, Razia. She grinned wide. Mama says flowers mean forgiveness. He looked at Mina, tears forming in his eyes. Then this one means more than anything I've ever been given. Mina smiled softly. Maybe we can both stop writing the same story now. He nodded. Yes, maybe it's time to start a new one. They stood up. The little girl waved. Bye, Uncle. Armin waved back. Bye, Razia. As they walked away, Mina turned one last time. Take care of yourself, Armin. You deserve peace too. He nodded, unable to speak. He watched them disappear into the sunlight. A mother and daughter walking hand in hand, carrying both his past and his redemption. That night, back in his studio, Armin opened his notebook again. On the first page, he wrote the title, Epilogue, The Day Forgiveness Smiled. Then he wrote, She came back into my life not to reopen wounds, but to show me that healing is real. The child carried her grandmother's name, and her laughter carried my peace. Maybe this is what redemption looks like, not forgetting, but learning to breathe beside the memory. He paused, then added one final line. And though I was the author of pain, she became the author of forgiveness. He closed the book gently, his eyes wet but his heart calm. Outside, the night breeze carried the scent of flowers. Somewhere a child's laughter echoed faintly, soft, innocent, endless. For the first time, Armin smiled without guilt. He whispered to himself. The story finally found its ending. The rain had returned that evening, gentle, steady, the kind that made everything outside blur into a soft dream. Armin sat by the window of his studio, the same spot where this entire story had begun years ago. The faint scent of wet soil drifted in, mixing with the smell of old paper and coffee. The clock ticked quietly. His notebook lay open, the last few pages blank. He stared at them for a long time. He had written so many stories about guilt, forgiveness, loss, and love. But this was different. This story was his life. He whispered to himself. Every author writes two stories, one for the world and one for his soul. And tonight, he would finish both. The door creaked open softly. It was Mina. She stood there holding a small umbrella, her hair damp from the rain. In her arms was a sleeping child and little Razia. She looked around the room, smiling faintly. It hasn't changed. Armin blinked in surprise. You're here, she nodded. Razia wanted to meet you again. She hasn't stopped talking about the man who writes stories. Armin smiled, his voice gentle. She has your eyes. Mina sat down carefully, placing the sleeping child on the couch. And your silence, she said quietly. They both laughed softly, a tired, knowing kind of laugh. I read your last manuscript, she said after a moment. The day forgiveness smiled. It felt like closure. He looked down. It was. Mina studied him for a long time. You look peaceful, Armin. Different. I've been learning to live with what I can't change, he replied. And to forgive the man I used to be. She nodded slowly. That's harder than forgiving anyone else. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of rain filling the room like background music from a distant memory. Then Armin spoke again, his voice lower now. I'm writing one final book, he said. After this, I'm done. What's it called? She asked. He smiled softly. The author's goodbye. Her expression changed, calm but curious. Goodbye to what? To everything that hurt, he said simply. To guilt, to pain, to the past that never let me breathe. I'm leaving it all on paper this time, so it can stay there forever. She looked at him, realizing there was something final in his tone. You sound like you're saying goodbye to more than a story. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at the rain outside. Maybe I am. Mina reached for his hand, her touch warm. Armin, don't disappear into your pain again. You already came back once. Don't fade this time. He turned to her, his eyes soft. I'm not fading, Mina, I'm finishing. They talked for hours that night. About Razia, about life, about forgiveness that took years to find. For the first time, there was no tension, no guilt, only peace, quiet and simple, like the rhythm of the falling rain. When it grew late, Mina stood. We should go. It's past her bedtime, Armin nodded. Thank you for coming, she smiled. Thank you for writing. As she turned to leave, he said, Mina? She looked back. Take care of her, he said softly. She's the best part of both of us. She nodded, understanding more than his words revealed. I will, she whispered. And then she was gone, into the rain, into the night, carrying their past and his peace with her. The next morning was quiet. A neighbor found Armin sitting at his desk, the rain still dripping outside the window. His eyes were closed, his head resting gently on his arm, a faint smile on his face. Beside him lay his notebook, the last one. On its open page, in careful handwriting, was his final note, the author's goodbye. I wrote stories about love, about betrayal, about forgiveness. But what I learned in the end is this. Every story, no matter how broken, finds its peace when it is told with honesty. I was once a sinner hiding behind fiction. Now I am just a man who told the truth, to Mina. Thank you for teaching me that forgiveness is stronger than pain. To Razia, grow up kind and remember that even mistakes can give birth to love. And to the woman whose name I will carry to my last breath, Razia Begum, I am sorry. If stories could erase guilt, I would live forever. But since they can't, let this one be my final chapter. Arman Qureshi. The world woke up to news the next week. Renowned writer Arman Qureshi passes away in sleep. His final manuscript, The Author's Goodbye, leaves readers in tears. The book became his legacy. People read it not as a confession, but as a lesson that even those who fall hardest can rise through truth. Years later, Mina sat on a bench in the same park where they had met again. Beside her, little Razia, now older, held a book in her lap. "Mama," she asked, "did you know the man who wrote this?" Mina smiled, looking at the title, The Author's Goodbye. "Yes," she said softly. "He was someone who once forgot what love meant, and then spent the rest of his life remembering." The girl smiled. "It's a sad story." Mina looked at the sky, her eyes gentle. "It's a true one." Razia leaned against her. "I think he's in heaven writing more stories." Mina kissed her forehead. "I think so too." The wind carried the scent of rain again. Soft, peaceful, forgiving, and somewhere beyond time and words, Armin's voice echoed faintly through the quiet air. "Every sin has an ending, and sometimes the ending is forgiveness itself."